I wanted to talk about who is like a total slept on Big Ten guy. So I framed it like this. Puka Nacua has just come out of absolutely nowhere. Like I get he played at BYU, but I mean, nobody knew who this dude was. Nobody expected a thing from him. And now he's like the most targeted player in the NFL. Part of that's because Cooper Kupp's out and Matt Stafford's special when he locks in on one receiver. But point is, Puka Nacua went from nothing to, oh, damn, that guy might be a Pro Bowler in like 3 weeks. Who could do that in the Big Ten this year? We've seen all the top 25 lists. We've talked about like breakout guys, blah, blah, blah. I want to know who's the guy that isn't being talked about, isn't on any of these lists, that there is like a real chance, maybe not a big one, but a chance that at the end of the season, this is a first team all Big Ten player. And looking back through the years, like there were obvious breakout candidates, like Jaden Ivey was an obvious breakout guy. I think some people saw Johnny Davis coming, some people didn't, but I'm really looking for a name that's like, this dude came off the grid and now he's a first team Big Ten player. And if you don't have any, you can say you don't have any, but I think we both have a couple. So who are you bringing to this table?
Okay. So before I do get going on this, first team all Big Ten might be a stretch for both of these guys. But one less of a stretch than the other, I'll say. And they both came from the same team, just letting that be known. And the first guy that came to mind is Justin Harmon from Illinois. So I think he played extremely well on the overseas trip. I think he really did. And he showed me something also in like the practice clips that I watched that I didn't necessarily think he had coming in. Obviously, we saw him play at Utah Valley last season. I was skeptical when I watched him there, but I don't know. I was a little bit more like, I need to watch him closely after seeing the practice clips and the overseas trips and things like that. And there's a world where I think that Underwood pivots from the Ty Rodgers point guard experience and is just like, you know what? It's not working out. Let's just play Ty at another position, and let's pivot to Harmon being the point guard of this team. And I think there's a world where he can emerge and take over that spot and give them some type of not only just steadiness, but also some very good play at the point guard position. And he's a guy that I don't think anybody's really mentioning, and they mentioned him last when they're talking about Illinois. But I do think there's a world where he becomes not like a first team all Big Ten guy, but like a really, really good Big Ten point guard. And I don't know where that gets him. Like maybe it gets him like third team or something like that. But I think that he could be set up to have a really good year, especially depending on the Ty Rodgers point guard experience.
So you changed the rules though.
Did I?
Yeah, because the only rule I had was give me someone who could. There is a world where he's a first team all.
Well, then let me pivot to my other guy though. I really just wanted to get a Justin Harmon shout in there.
I respect it. Actually, I was going to say I like your pick. I think better than mine, and I'll get to it in a moment. But I like that pick because there is like a previous path here. He would do the Jalen Pickett, Tyson Walker, right? Like. Nobody had those guys as like, oh, that's one of the best guards in the Big Ten. And then 2 years later, he was there. I don't know if it's going to be this year for Harmon. It would need to be this year, I think. But like there is a precedent there, right? And I've shrugged him off every time we've ever talked about it. But you're right. He did look pretty good in the film from the overseas trip. So I like that pick. I just don't think you should have backed off and said, maybe it's third team. Like, stand by the pick. If it hits,
you're right. You're right. I got soft about it. But the other guy that I picked while I was going back and forth with is Damask. Okay. I think Damask could be first team all Big Ten. I do. He's got the game. He's got the skill. I think that, you don't want to look at it as like he's a Matthew Meyer replacement, but I don't know if he's as good as Matthew Meyer, but I think he likes basketball and likes being there more than Matthew Meyer. And that's going to account for something.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. We're kind of going back and forth here, which is fine. I have a different Illinois name though.
It's all Illinois guys.
It's the obvious one, but this is the Illinois. I think it is Ty Rodgers, and I've talked about my skepticism of him, but maybe people would push back and say this guy is on the radar. He is talked about. I don't think anyone's taking him serious though. Like I think the outside of Illinois, outside of Champaign circles, I think everyone has the reaction you and I do, which is like laughing at the idea of Ty Rodgers being a point guard. If Ty Rodgers hits, like if he was an A+ out of A+, best case version of himself, That's a first team all Big Ten guy, right? Like if he actually is this jumbo point guard that is getting like 7 rebounds a game and 5 assists and who knows how much he's scoring, like, I don't know. That would be one of one. It would be unicorn style good. And I know like they have Terrence Shannon, who's a lock first team all Big Ten guy. So that's probably the biggest obstacle to any other Illinois guy being on it. But I think it's more likely Rogers than any of the other guys we've named would be the ceiling guy. And I'm skeptical of that happening for all the reasons I've talked about in the past. But for this exercise specifically, where it's like who's off the radar that could come on, it's definitely Ty. Like he could explode and be way better than we expect. And all of a sudden, Illinois is a top 10 team in the country.
Okay, I like that. But because we got to dodge the clickbait allegations, can we pick one non-Illinois player?
I have 2 non-Illinois players.
Oh, please.
Okay. You want both of them?
Yes.
This one I was expecting you to say at some point. So sorry if I'm cutting you off. Ohio State Buckeyes, Roddy Gayle. So there were a couple names I considered here. I thought about Okpara because I don't think he's getting enough love. But I think people actually are kind of talking about Okpara. Like because Hoops and Inside the Hall listed Zed Key at 10, it caused so much pushback of everybody else being like, you have the wrong center on this list. Nobody's mentioning Roddy Gayle at all. And again, if you were at the Big Ten tournament last year, Carter and I were, it was a great time. Roddy was special. He was different for the first 2 rounds of that tournament. And we've gassed up Bruce Thornton a ton. I still am buying Bruce stock. I think he's incredible. But like Roddy reminds me of Bruce Brown a lot. And I don't know if that's just like an aesthetic vibe, but to me, like he's this bouncy.
Kind of is though.
He's this bouncy 2 guard that can play with the ball in his hands. That's a good defender that can score. Like we all are on the breakout sophomore train. I've said that a ton. I just think Roddy Gayle belongs in the conversation the same way Bruce Thornton does. And there is a world where Roddy Gayle is Ohio State's best player this year. And if that happens, like, yeah, first team all conference numbers are in the equation for Roddy Gayle Jr.
I like that pick. That was actually a guy I was considering for mine too, along with Okpara.
Okay.
Just because I feel like, doesn't Okpara have a good enough season and like everything they slide Cliff into first team for? Like, if you think about it, to me, Okpara is a better version of, or ends up being a better version than Cliff. I just don't know when he takes that step, but I think he ends up being a better version than him.
I like that on paper. I like that call out. Yeah, the reason I went Gayle over Okpara is I don't see Okpara's numbers. I don't see any world where Okpara's like leading scorer on Ohio State. And I think whoever is the guy that would jump up the first team would need to be that. And I do think there's a chance Roddy Gayle could be what we think Bruce Thornton is. All right, here's my third name. This is probably the most controversial one. We've talked about the guy before. I've been, screaming about how high I am on this kid all offseason.
Bro, Trey Jackson is not going to do anything.
It's Trey Kaufman-Renn.
No.
I thought when you said Trey, I thought you nailed it.
No,
so we don't wish injury on anybody, obviously, especially this guy. But if Zach Edey was unavailable at any point this season, I think you would immediately see how good Trey Kaufman-Renn can be. And this would be a bet strictly on something like that happening. But again, back to the Puka Nacua thing. Why is Puka looking great right now?
Cooper Kupp's out.
Cooper Kupp is not here. If Zach Edey, if God forbid, knock on wood, it doesn't happen. If something happened to him, I think Kaufman-Renn is immediately a double-double every single night. Like I think they are immediately getting like 15, 16, and 10 nights from this guy. And nobody sees that coming. Like I'm sure people are going to listen to this and just totally laugh at me. Like how do I possibly think their backup center that is going to try to play at the 4 with him can do this? I think he's a monster, you guys. I'm calling it like I see it. He looked so good in the overseas trip without Zach Edey. He was Purdue's best player alongside Braden Smith on the trip overseas. And I can't wait. I love Zach Edey. I love everything he does for the Big Ten and Purdue. I can't wait for the post-Zach Edey era because I am ready for the Trey Kaufman-Renn era. And again,
don't you mean the Will Berger?
It's the Trey Kaufman-Renn era, my friend. I promise. This kid is special. I think this kid is absolutely special, and probably won't be this year. There's a world where it is. Like imagine if the worst case thing happened. Imagine if it's the second game of the season and Zach Edey suffers something that has him out for 3 months. That would be horrendous. I hope it doesn't happen. It's terrible. I hate thinking about it. But imagine if it did, and they put Trey Kaufman-Renn in, and he averaged 16 and 10 the rest of the year, and Purdue stayed a top 5 team in the country. Is he not like Big Ten Player of the Year if that happens? Like,
he would get consideration.
It might happen, and I don't think that's as crazy as anybody else we've named. Like we're kind of going up and down, stretching for guys that maybe it could have. Like I think it would happen if Kaufman-Renn was put in that position this year.
I like that shout. I was surprised that you didn't lead with Trey Kaufman-Renn. That's why I thought you was going to be your main point guy.
It's just too hard to see because, I mean, we all hope Zach Edey is the National Player of the Year, and there's no world where they're both on a first-team All-Big Ten team. But hopefully, I mean, one day we will see Trey Kaufman-Renn as a solo best player in the front court. It'll be great.
I don't mean to pat ourselves on the back, but those are some damn good shouts by us on that segment.
It's a good segment today. Good show today, honestly. I think you deserve a lot of credit. I liked your energy today. So
it's because we got a guy.